Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Louise Abbott. Some of you know me. I'm Vice President of ELAN. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's the English Language Arts Network, a provincial organization based in Montreal, but serving the regions as well. And I'm chairperson of the Arts and Cultural Regional Roundtable. And like Nick, I'd like to welcome you all today. See, we have someone new. Thanks, Louise, for this info. My power is blinking. Hope I can be here. Okay, I hope so too, Judy. We see you. The Roundtable Committee was formed after the last meeting held by the Department of Canadian Heritage. Every fall, the department consults with arts and culture representatives, and the Roundtable was formed after our last meeting. And the committee members include people living and or working in the regions. And we've been meeting online since last winter to discuss ways in which we could best serve individual Anglophones or Anglophone organizations working in the arts and culture sectors. We realize that many of us in the regions, including myself, work in the heritage sector as well as in arts and culture. We brainstormed and came up with numerous very ambitious ideas. We were aware that local arts organizations often find it challenging to find appropriate, affordable locations for art exhibitions, book launches, concerts, and other cultural activities. And when you do have the right premises, you can thrive. And I know that from my personal experience as a co-founder of Studio Georgeville, which has run an art gallery and cultural center in a lovely heritage building in the heart of Georgeville since 2008. Ultimately, we decided to host a series of webinars on repurposing religious buildings for arts and cultural spaces, because so many rural communities are seeing congregations dwindle and church buildings being put up for sale, which is actually the case in Georgeville. I know that some of you are equally interested in repurposing religious buildings for heritage purposes, so we trust that the webinar series will help you in reaching your goal. You may also want to consult another provincial organization, QAN, the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network, for the services that they offer. We wanted to start our series with a dynamic presenter, Sandy Foote, who has an inspiring success story to share with us. But first, I'm going to hand the microphone, so to speak, back to Nick for some logistical details.
Thank you, Louise. Hi, everyone. So my name is Nick Maturo. I'm the Director of Programming with ELAN. That's the English Language Arts Network, as Louise was saying. And just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. So I did want to note, as you'll have seen on your Zoom, that this session is being recorded for archival purposes, because we really do want to make this information as widely available as possible. And Sandy has graciously allowed us to record his presentation today. So if for any reason you're not comfortable with your own image being recorded, I encourage you to either keep your camera off. You can also send me a message in the chat so I can ensure that your image, if it does appear, is edited out in the final video. So please just let me know. I also kindly ask that you keep your microphone muted during today's presentation, just to avoid any distractions for other participants. You are, of course, welcome to unmute when you ask a question. So speaking of questions, you're welcome to pose those during the course of the presentation. It'll be easiest we just address those as we go along. So to ask a question, you can either use the raise hand feature in Zoom, so you can signal that you have a question, or you can simply type it in the chat and I'll share it on your behalf. So for those of you not familiar with the raise hand feature, you simply have to click the reactions button or sort of react button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and then there will be an option there that says raise hand. And I'd ask that you please do that rather than raise your actual hand on camera, as it's not always easy to see when that is the case. So yeah, please do ask questions as we go along here. That'll be easiest to address them in context, but we hopefully will also have some time left over at the end for maybe a more open-ended sort of Q&A session, but that'll of course depend on how many questions we have along the way. Otherwise, if you're experiencing any technical issues with your Zoom, please feel free to message me in the chat. I'll do my best to help you out. Of course, we are, again, recording this, so if for any reason, like for Judy, if you're having power issues or anything else, trust that we are getting a recording of this, so you can always check back in for anything that you missed. So that's it for me. I'm going to hand things back to Louise.
And I, in turn, will hand them over to Sandy Foote, who's involved with an amazing cultural center in Chelsea, La Fab sur Mill. Sandy, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, Nick, and welcome everyone. Yes, I'm going to tell you the story of LaFab. We're just ending our 4th year since we purchased LaFab and in our transformation. So I'm going to take you through the process of our transformation and I identify some of the success factors and some of the challenges. And especially now, as we're moving from transformation into much broader programming, what you have to do as an art center, or what we have to do. So, as Louise said, we're located in Chelsea, Quebec. We're a community-driven cultural hub. So, we're essentially run by volunteers. We have one full-time staff member, and we're operating in a restored 150-year-old church. In fact, 2025 is our 150th anniversary. The church was occupied in August of 1875 and built by local residents on Mill Road in I would say the lumbering part of Chelsea. And it so we purchased it. It is volunteer led and it's artist supported. As a co-op, 75% of our members and our board are artists, and the non-artists or support members are there to help us make this facility work. We're serving the English-speaking minority and building bilingual bridges. We really are a bilingual organization. So what's our mandate? Well, we have 3 aspects to our mandate. The first is supporting artists' livelihoods. We believe it's very difficult to be a full-time artist in a community, and that we provide opportunities for artists to produce their work, to teach, etc., and we ensure that they make proper wages as an artist if they're involved with the FAB. But as important is providing arts experiences and education to the regional community. Interesting enough, when we purchased the church in 2021 and we opened the doors before we started any renovation, suddenly everybody was there. It identified there was a real need in the community for arts experiences. The third part of our mandate is ensuring a sustainable operation. As a community-led, volunteer-driven organization, sustainability is key to ongoing success. And I have to say that's one of our core challenges is how do you get the funding you need to support accessible programming and artists in our community. So we provide intergenerational bilingual programs of bringing together our residents, our artists, and our newcomers. And as an example, we have music series providing classical, jazz, world and folk music. We have a wonderful summer art camp, and we just had our 2nd season last year. And we provide intergenerational art, singing, and dance classes with community partners. We provide exhibitions of community artists to ensure that works are displayed and work across our region and other regions to have multifaceted exhibitions. In fact, right now, we're just nearing the end of our Des Moines exhibition about the main river in the northern Pontiac. We've also opened a ceramic studio because there was no ceramic studio in the region that is open to the public and to special members. So I think, as Louise said, part of our response to this building is recognizing its heritage value while we're transforming it. This was a former Grace United Church. Started off as a Methodist church on Mill Road. There were 2 other churches on Mill Road, a Presbyterian church and a Congregational church. They actually joined up with the Methodists when their churches burnt down, and in 1914 became a United Church. We now house a gallery, artist studios, a boutique, the ceramic studio, and the concert hall. And we were renovated with regional, provincial, and federal grants, public donations, and social funders. In fact, in being true Canadian, we have many sources of funding that are critical for our work. Now I'm going to give you a brief history where it all started. In 2019, the United Church was down to 22 congregants, and they were looking to what to do with the building. the United Church in this area had 5 churches, and they started to sell them off. Grace was one of those. They approached the municipality to see if the municipality would buy the United Church. And through its study, and Mayor Carol Green at the time, they determined the municipality could not afford to do this because of the requirement to bring it up to municipal standards. So they undertook a feasibility study, and they actually engaged my wife, Roberta, to lead the study to see whether through community partnerships, the Grace United could be turned into a community arts center. And you can actually, if you at the top right, that was nearly new in the basement of the church, which was a thrift shop, and the bottom left is the sanctuary where they held their church services. So the community got heavily involved. The feasibility study identified that, yes, this could be turned into a community arts center. We're driven by the supporters and volunteers. In 2020, COVID hit, and everything went on hold. But a small group from the original study kept going, and they determined that we should go forward with the purchase of the church. So a new beginning started. The Fab, who we are now, was actually a visual arts co-op that was beside St. Stephen's Catholic Church on Old Chelsea Road. And they had occupied the manse for 10 years and actually had saved the manse from destruction. And through an arrangement with the Catholic Church, their lease was coming to an end, and they were unable to reach a new lease agreement and needed a new home. United Church determined, especially during COVID, they could no longer afford to keep the building running, and Chelsea needed a cultural center. So the purchase was led by social entrepreneurs, and we bought the church for $355,000 in July 1st, 2021. On June 30th, it was deconsecrated and became then on July 1st a community arts center. The municipality committed to recognizing it as a heritage building and providing an annual subsidies for 5 years, which gave us a kickstart on what we were doing. We felt it was very important to be recognized as a heritage building so that we wouldn't lose what was originally put there by the residents of Chelsea. So with that, we started planning. We put together a 5-year business plan and a vision. We hired Juxta Architects, which is an architectural firm that specializes in heritage properties, and commissioned it to adapt to our needs. All of this was done actually with CPRQ, Conseil Patrimoine Religieux. They gave us the grant to do the original study. And then with the success of that, we were able to apply for longer term funding. So we got $649,000 from CPRQ that had to be matched. And so we matched it with Canadian Economic Development Quebec, the MRC through the Fonds Région et Ruralité, through donors, et cetera, to come up with the funding we needed for our renovation. So this started in 2021, in the fall of 2021. Then in the spring of 2022, we went out for tender and hired a firm to help us with our phase 1 renovation. Phase 1 focused on moving the Lefab artists from where they were up on Old Chelsea Road into the building. So we built 7 artist studio, a gallery, a boutique. In the sanctuary, in our performance hall, we installed new sound equipment and lighting, but didn't do any upgrades. Key to all this, we did a full upgrade of our electrical systems and our furnace systems. We had originally, the church had 2 oil furnaces, one for the original building and its extension. And we were able to get grants to replace them with heat pumps, the electric furnaces with heat pumps, which has changed the building. One of the key things that changed was that we actually have air conditioning in the summer. The United Church used to have to close for the summer because it was just too hot inside. Interestingly enough, throughout this, we welcomed the public, and we were able to continue giving classes, having performances, et cetera, throughout our construction, which was a real feat at times. So this gives you an idea of the artist village that we built, is where we put the 7 studios in the boutique. The bottom left shows you the empty space where we removed the ceiling, and then we started constructing the studios. The windows that you see in the middle, those are actually the original storm windows from the church that our cleaning lady had saved. And we were able to use them as the windows into the studios. And in the boutique, we were able to restore original windows from the church so that there was a continuity between the heritage space upstairs and the space downstairs. We took the old Sunday school room, and it was also the nursery, and we converted it into our gallery. And we opened the gallery up. We put doors in to open it up between the stage in the sanctuary hall and the gallery so that we could have a flow through each, as well as we bought a mini grand Steinway piano, and we're able to move it off the stage if it's needed. The classroom was right beside our kitchen, and it was converted. In fact, it went through 2 conversions. Right at what you're looking at here is when it was just a classroom for art classes, and now it's actually our ceramic studio. What we found when we removed the ceilings under the old building was there was a lot of rot in the original beams, and mostly dry rot. And our structural engineers told us you cannot have 100 people dancing on that floor. In fact, we did a number of times, and the floor would actually wave. And people said, "That's an amazing floor you have." And if it had gone through before resupporting it, we wouldn't have a church anymore or a building. All during this, we had a living art space upstairs, and we were doing jazz, classical, folk types of concerts, some theater, some activities. Our dance school was in this hall. So we finished in the summer of 2022. We finished phase 1, and we moved into phase 2. So this was actually doing the full transformation of the outside of the building and putting in the ceramic studio and completing the performance hall. This was a much bigger project than the first phase, and it was a big learning experience for us. I have to say that throughout this, working with our architects, working with our contractors, working with CPRQ and our funders was a very good experience. Personally, I learned a lot about how do you go through project management of a project this size, as I was the main project manager interfacing with all these groups. And I have to say, I know a lot more than I did, especially about providing proper documentation. So this was the church stripped down. What had to happen in 1957? The United Church was growing rapidly, so they added an addition onto the back, and you can see on the bottom right that so the jutting out is that put another basically 2,000 square feet, and throughout this, they covered the whole building in asbestos shingles. And we believe they covered the original church in asbestos shingles so they wouldn't have to paint the old pine siding anymore, which you can see how faded it was. So we had to strip it right back to its original siding and then restore it out from there. Including in this, we had to dig up the entire foundation to ensure that it was both solid and it could be properly sealed. What we decided to do was in the exterior restoration is replace the windows that United Church had put in, which were standard rectangular thermal pane windows, with replica windows from Marvin, because we felt that to maintain its heritage look, it needed to have some elements that represented that. And the Marvin, these windows, Methodist style windows, are more Romanesque with the rounded top. So, but they're also very modern, and it adds a real quality. I remember talking to my architect and saying, "That's a very expensive component to this." It was $60,000 to put in what was it? Essentially 9 windows, and And my architect said, this will pay itself off in time. And I can't think of the number of times people have admired those windows as we've come in. Now, the shows must go on. So during the renovation of the Sanctuary Hall, this was a Thursday morning, and 2 years ago, this Thursday, we every year we put on the Gatineau Hills Fiddle Festival, which is a major fiddling festival in this region. And on the Thursday night of the festival, they have a square dance. Thursday morning, they were installing windows in the Sanctuary Hall. And Thursday night, we had ran the festival for that weekend. It was a real challenge, but it just shows you how well we worked with our the municipality and with our architects and our contractors to enable us to get back up and running at all times. So this is in the sanctuary. What we did was we completely renovated the stage, put down a proper dance floor, put more choral style stairs on it, as we have two choirs that utilize our facility, an adult choir and a youth choir. We painted the floor with I would say, a Victorian floral pattern to give it life. The original floor had about 6 layers of paint, and we didn't want to replace it. We wanted to save it. So what we researched and found that to seal that lead paint, we could cover it and put a seal on top. So we decided if we were going to do it, we'd actually put a floral patterns, which continues to distress. And the pews, we originally had pews right across. We sold the pews in the center, and the pews on the sides, we developed a technique where we could put drop hinges so they could be put up against the wall for our dance schools and put out for our concerts. In September of 2024, we were awarded by CPRQ Award of Excellence as the People's Choice of 11 different projects across the province. We were chosen as the People's Choice Award for the renovation and use of the building. And that was a wonderful crowning moment for us. So I want to just go through some of what we saw as the key success factors. Strategic philanthropy. I'm a philanthropist, a social entrepreneur, and heavily involved in how do you help organizations and not-for-profit organizations become sustainable, find the funding, build the organization. We're a volunteer-run cooperative. As I mentioned, we have one full-time employee. The rest of us are all volunteers. We must have 40 to 50 active volunteers. Another key aspect was we own our own building. So therefore, we're in control of our building. That can be a challenge and a blessing, but owning our building really helped us in getting our grants because we could control the direction. I have a very strong board of directors with professional skills. Our example, our treasurers, an economist on the Bank of Canada. Our architect is an Austrian trained architect. So we are very lucky with our board. Also, what's key, and I think this came out of the original study, is what they said, anchor tenants. It's really important for key groups to use our space. So I mentioned our two choirs. They're key anchor tenants for us. Our dance school, Chelsea Dance, uses our space 3 times a week. We have the artists in our studios downstairs that rent on a regular basis. We have 15 to 18 members of our ceramic studio. These all provide both links to the community, cultural experiences community, and I would say predictable funding for us. We have key partnerships with Chelsea. We have an MOU providing us a subsidy every year. MRC de Colleen is a huge supporter, CPRQ, and the Quebec and federal governments. What about challenges? Well, there are a number of challenges, and I'd say at the top of the list is securing consistent and diverse funding. In Canada, as a not-for-profit, you really have to have a sustaining mix of grants, donations, generated income, and these are really critical for your strategic planning. Right now, I would say our core challenge is operational funding. I can find project funding. It's very straightforward, but operational funding for staff is it's a challenge. Recruiting and retaining staff and volunteers. So it's attracting and supporting committed team members, both paid and unpaid. That remains difficult, and you need to work with strong capacity and resources. There's a in the volunteer world, 5 years is a big thing for volunteers. Is that you want to keep your volunteers interested in going. And I have to say that many of our volunteers, like myself, are retired seniors, and you can only expect so much. So we're really focused on recruiting younger people and getting their energy, et cetera, into the building. The third challenge is we're operating it in a heritage space. So we restored it and been recognized as a heritage space. But as a 150-year-old building, 150 years ago, accessibility was not a consideration. And our challenge is that we're actually on 3 separate levels. Our bathrooms are behind the stage, which requires you going down a set of stairs and up a set of stairs. We can put a ramp up the front, but that just gets you to the sanctuary hall. Doesn't get you to the gallery, doesn't get you to the bathrooms, doesn't get you to the downstairs. So this is an ongoing important thing for us because we're highly committed to accessibility. The other thing is balancing community expectations with capacity. So we have a very enthusiastic public that demand and must be public demand that must be balanced with our limited human and financial resources. So the building is active all the time. I have to say every night of the week, all weekends, it's in active use. My lowest usage is during the day in the mornings, during the week. So we have to really look at how we program this building. Our last challenge is building a unified cultural vision in a diverse region. So what's really important to us is creating inclusive programming for both English and French speakers, and for diverse artistic disciplines and age groups. It requires time and trust. And we've been slowly building that. In Chelsea, we're very blessed to have artists of all disciplines, from dance, theater, visual arts, all types of music, from fiddling to jazz, to classical. It's how do you build a hub for all these people to say that Lefebvre is a home. So we work hard on that. So what's next for us is phase 3. It's really accessibility and putting in elevators and bathrooms and doing it and creating an arts district with a regional center for contemporary arts. This is a conceptual look at what we want to do, is mimicking the original roof line of the building, is building pavilions that are spread out and behind our original facility, with the first one being a ground level reception area with an elevator connecting all 3 levels, and proper washrooms upstairs and downstairs supporting disabilities. And then in time, adding pavilions for things like theater, for purpose-built ceramic studio, dance studio, more workshop space, more artist studio space, artists in residence, tied into a park with outdoor amphitheater. So right now we have an application into Canadian Heritage to do the feasibility study, engineering, and architectural drawings for this. This is longer term. So the heart of our transformation, the last slide, was really from a need to a regional cultural beacon, driven by a team of dedicated community volunteers, guided by experienced social entrepreneurs and board members. And in 4 years, we took a historic church and it became a fully functioning art center at Lefebvre. And we think this is a repeatable model of rural cultural revitalization. So that's I'm going to stop the share. And that's our story.
I'm sure that there are questions. Who would like to start first? Well, I will, if no one else wants to, or have I missed anything in the chat?
No, go ahead, Louise.
Okay. I was curious about the windows. There were no stained glass windows in the United Church?
No, in fact, following a Methodist tradition, there's no adornment for God in the building. There was a few plaques here and there. The original works were multi-pane, uh, but no stained glass.
No stained glass, okay. And I didn't catch the name of the architecture firm that you mentioned specialize in this kind of restoration.
Their name is Juxta, Juxta Architects, and they're based in Ottawa. And in fact, just to let you know, they're being awarded a major Canadian Heritage Award for architects this Friday in Halifax for the work they did on our church.
Congratulations.
I have to say that they were so good, especially around deficiencies that I would never notice. That right down to the color of a button on a doorknob, they noticed it, and our contractors stepped up and made all the changes. They were very good.
Sandy, I have a question for you. Obviously, this has all come together quite quickly, but obviously some time has passed since the beginning of sort of the initial study for the project and where we're at now. What do you think, if anything, has changed between the context in which LaFab came together and this current moment, if somebody was interested in sort of developing a similar project now? Obviously, aside from the kind of obvious around things like inflation and rising costs.
I would say it was sort of serendipitous for us to happen right in the midst of COVID. And so 2021, there was money from government to support projects like this. And so that was a key factor for us. The other thing that being a small Protestant church in Quebec, we're not a large Catholic church. Our project overall was $1.2 million. And so the funding from the Quebec government of 640,000 during an election year, because 2021 was an election year, and the Outaouais had been sort of ignored in many ways. It was a good project that to fund. So I think we were serendipitously right place, right time at that time. And the partners that we chose were very good for us as well. I think the overall team. So today's situation is quite different with what's going on. It's south of the border with tariffs, with funding going to other things in arts and culture. Much more difficult to get the kind of funding in place. So I'd say that's the biggest change.
Then maybe a quick follow-up question, because obviously you talked about the sort of social entrepreneurship side of things and developing partnerships within the community. If the sort of government funding side of things is a little bit less certain, what advice could you give to folks based on your experience in that side of things about how you sort of encourage financial participation from partners within the community?
Well, I think well, as a social entrepreneur, I think you have to like buying the building was critical to it, not asking someone else to buy it for us. So our co-op owns our own building. And that sort of put a stake in the ground. And then I have to say the community in Chelsea is highly supportive of projects like this and have stepped up in being both in volunteering and as donors to support it. And so it's an important, I would say, component of a funding model, but not enough. I mean, unless you have somebody with very deep pockets, these are expensive undertakings. But we work very closely with the municipality, with our mayor and council, the Department of Recreation and Culture. We work very closely with them and partner a lot. Also with our MRC, working with the prefect and their staff in the cultural sector. They step up and help us as needed.
Sandy, in terms of the MRC, I know that our MRC, there's a cultural development agent, but it's about a fifth of her time is devoted to culture. Is it really different in your, and I don't know if they would have significant funds to give to a project of that kind. Is your MRC, do they have a completely different stance on culture?
Our MRC has a dedicated cultural officer who's focused on funding for the full region. They have limited funds as it relates to culture. Basically, we apply every year for funds up to $5,000 that we can match with others. That's for programming. It was through FRR that they worked with us to help us get through the regional funds funding for a portion of this work. And so they're able to go beyond just the cultural funds to support this. But we work very closely with our cultural officer.
Any other questions in the chat or in the, I can keep asking questions if nobody else has them, because I'm trying to think of questions that might be relevant for an organization that I'm supporting locally. You mentioned the CPRQ, and I'm curious to know what kind of funding you got from the different agencies. Like you just mentioned the Department of Canadian Heritage, you're applying for a feasibility study, is that
That's correct.
correct? So what about the CPRQ? I mean, what kind of money can they give for what kind of parts of the project?
So CPRQ, we got 600 and I think it was $640,000 that we would receive as we matched it. This is one of the things I learned as and this is specifically for the restoration of the building, not for buying equipment, etc. It was all around the restoration of the building, and they would provide us that 50% when we paid an invoice. So, like for our contractor DMJ, when they sent us an invoice for work already done, I would get it approved by CPRQ, and then I would ensure that I would send that along with the proof of payment for my supplier. So they ensured our suppliers were always paid, and then they would give us back 50% of that. So to cover the other 50%, we got a $250,000 grant from Canadian Economic Development Quebec. We got $100,000 from the FRR fund. We raised $250,000 from the community. And so we you have to package all these things together over time. We're coming to the end of our CPRQ grant. I've got about 80,000 left. I'm trying to find ways of spending, but it's a challenge because you got to match it. Our last project, actually, which I didn't show you, is that we renovated our kitchen starting at the end of August, and it's just in the final stages of renovation. CPRQ gave us $25,000. I got $25,000 from the Canadian. What is the program for seniors support, and the name will come to me, and then another 10,000 from Desjardins for our appliances. So I look all over the place for funding for these projects.
It sounds like you must be very good at grant applications. We have another question from Brianna Doyle. Is Brianna there? Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I'm interested in learning more about some of these grants that from non-cultural sources.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like specifically, you mentioned the Canadian Economic Development Grant for Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in how you qualified for that grant, or like what kinds of projects they were willing to fund, and also how you found some of these additional grant opportunities.
Well, so starting off, we worked with a gentleman named Peter Gillies, who lives in La Pêche, and I would call him a grant guru, and I think Richard would agree with that. So Peter was able to, he'd been working in the grant world for a long time, so he was able to source these various grants, and then we worked with him and the agencies, because it was, you know, the nature of our project, and because we owned our building and we had a good team, we fit the requirements. But yeah, I would say that the majority of our grants came outside of the cultural sector, and it was about the heritage component and the transformation. CPRQ, the key thing was that we were transforming from a religious facility to a non-religious facility, but we were saving a heritage building. Now, CPRQ's funding has been cut, and I don't believe they're providing any new grants right now. But they were key to the success of this project. So, but I have to say, I scan all the time for grants. our local MP, Sophie Chattel, sends us grant opportunities all the time. And for example, and the New Horizons for Seniors, that's the program I got for the kitchen. It was they love matching, so I'm able to you get one, you find a matcher, etc., and you just keep going.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We're in a very similar space in Hudson. We have a philanthropist who purchased a church hall that was up for sale and would have otherwise become somebody's home. And it's been converted into a community arts center, but we have no grant funding right now. And so we're doing what we're doing on a lot of volunteerism and a lot of donations. And it's good to hear that there are some non-standard kind of places to go looking for those kinds of grants.
Mm-hmm. I definitely Heritage Canada has a lot of programs, especially they have a whole sector for English language support, and they've been very helpful for us.
Thank you so much.
Could you tell us a bit more about the FRR? I had never heard that acronym before.
It's a funny fund. It's like a farm regional rural fund in Quebec. And every MRC receives a portion of an annual amount that they can dedicate to projects and FRR funding. And we were successful in our first year getting that $100,000 from FRR, and we got it was our prefect at the time, Carol Green, that helped us get that. And so working through our MRC, we were able to get that funding. But it's as I say, it's a regional rural fund. It's really designed for around farming and regional development.
And Nick has put a link in the chat for more information about that.
I'm also about to add, we've done some brief translation, sort of translated summaries of those programs as well for anybody who'd like to access those in English for a bit of a jump start. So there's that link there.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask if the FRR funds are aimed mainly at the kind of rural and farming aspects. How did you position the project so that it would be interesting to that funder?
That's a very good question. It was because we're in a rural area and we're a heritage church, and that has supported an evolving, emerging community. I think that's what really did it. And at the time, they were looking for people to fund too.
I'll maybe just add for anybody who's interested on the funding side of things, Elan does have a funding consultation service where you can book some time with one of our advisors to sort of talk about your needs. We can give you some indications of what programs might be most relevant to your needs. So I will put the contact information in the chat if ever you'd like to reach out and book a session.
I'd like to say that everything that Sandy has spoken about would never have happened without his leadership and over-the-top effort, Sandy. So, if you're thinking of doing this kind of initiative in other locations, you really need to find a entrepreneur who will support culture and arts the way Sandy has done. So thank you, Sandy.
Well, thank you, Richard. Actually, two of our board members are here, Lise and Richard, critical to the success of the project.
Actually, Sandy, on that note, I had a quick question because you talked about, how valuable it is to have a sort of skilled and engaged board. And you gave some examples of the kind of skill set that people in your particular case had. Could you maybe talk through sort of what is the ideal kind of range of skills or expertise that you'd like to have on a board for a project like this, even in general terms?
I would say there's a professionalism you're looking for in the board. So clearly, like you gave the example of our accountant being on with the Bank of Canada as an economist, so can help us look forward. Our architect really guided the project. Lise, who heads up our communications and also very strong translator and very functional in helping us drive that. That's critical. Richard, who heads up our visual arts, he's a well recognized artist and in many things from filmmaking to visual arts. So I think, and then I think of Kay Kerman, who is former teacher. She's an artist. She heads up our visual arts programming and all dedicated and also very smart. Having past governance experience really helps because being on a volunteer board, it's there is a herding cats aspect to it that you can run into. That if you have people with board experience, they understand what it takes. They understand the importance of board meetings. I'll give you an example. When we had our first board meeting back in July 2021, it was sitting around a table without an agenda. And we brought with us checkbooks and a box of papers from the old Lefab. So now our board meetings, we have consent agendas. All the reports are in well before the board meeting. We focus on strategic elements at the board meeting, and everybody is on the board is responsible for a certain area of Lefab. So that's what I would say is you build a professionalism into your board as well as you hire board members that have background in being on boards, especially in the arts sector.
Absolutely. And to that end, I just want to note that I popped a link in the chat for anyone. We actually have a webinar coming up on Thursday at lunchtime, sort of about the basics of board roles and responsibilities in the not-for-profit sector. And so if anybody's interested, it may be a useful topic.
Nick, if I may ask a request, Lefab is going to bury a time capsule on our land, celebrating and collecting documents from the last 150 years of our building. And there'll be a lot of photographs and historical documents and videos. And it would be wonderful if we had a copy of this Zoom presentation and we could also bury that in the time capsule.
Absolutely. That can be done.
100 years from now, someone can still open a USB key or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Does everyone present today consent to being a part of history? Can I see it? All right, I'm seeing smiling faces. Yeah, okay, that can be done, Richard, for sure.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, please? You mentioned the board. Did you actively look for board members? Did people come to you? You said hired at one point. I mean, the board is all volunteer, I'm assuming. So how did you attract such skilled people who are interested in giving so much of their time and expertise to your group?
Well, certainly with the original board of Lefab came to us, and Richard was on the original board at Lefab. So we kept some of those members stayed, and then I basically targeted people that I knew. And Lisa's a good example because she's on another board with me, and I've been on the other boards with her. So lots of experience. And then our first treasurer, Mathieu, who is a very good treasurer for me on another board, I grabbed him. So, you go grab people.
Any other questions from folks? We still do have a little bit of time, so please don't be shy if there's anything that you're wondering.
Well, I might ask about the Department of Canadian Heritage again. How is their funding being affected by all of the other changes you mentioned, tariffs and so on that had affected the CPRQ? Have they also been cut back?
It's interesting. I believe they will be cut back because the various grants that are coming out at this time have already been pre-planned, but in the fiscal year 26, 27, I suspect there will be changes, especially with the budget coming out in November. There will be continued cultural funding, but I don't think to the degree that we've seen before.
If I can maybe jump in and give some perspective there,
Yeah,
I
that
think
helps.
certainly, I think the first week of November we're expecting the budget, and that will give some some indications, I think, to the department first and foremost, which they will then communicate to the community around whether there are going to be cuts or what have you. But I think one important consideration is the fact that I think, Sandy, as you had mentioned, there is a lot of program going through the official languages program that is for Francophones outside of Quebec, but obviously for Anglophones within Quebec as well. And a lot of that funding is locked in to a degree anyway, based on the official languages action plan, which runs through 2028. So I would say it's not absolute stability there, but there is probably a greater degree of stability in those programs than there might be in other areas of Canadian heritage.
That's great.
And what about the Secretariat? Would that be a possible funder or not?
Certainly, I think in general, that's something that I would encourage people to look at. I know that they're in a situation now where they are waiting, I think, for the kind of renewal of their funding program. There's always a sort of multi-year, I can't remember the term that they use, but essentially a multi-year sort of agreement that conditions the terms of the funding, how much they have to operate with their budget. So I think they are expecting clarity on that sometime between now and the spring. So we'll have a better idea then in terms of what their funding priorities are, perhaps what their budget is looking like moving forward. But certainly in general, absolutely, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I have a question about project writing. How critical is the project writing to get the money that you need? Like, should we be looking for somebody who is a very good project writer?
That certainly helps, Judy. What I've learned over the years, it's knowing your funder right off the bat. Let's say there's an opportunity for funding, and let's say a particular grant, is finding the person who's involved with that grant, let's say in Canadian Heritage or CPRQ, etc. Test ideas out with them to see whether they're feasible. Then writing the grant, because they're usually very good at telling you what to write and what not to write, what are the key focuses. And then project writing is really important. Having a good grant writer does help a lot. And so telling your story, and then the key part is your budget. And then how much money you're looking for, how you're spending it. And what I found is two aspects to the budget: is the money you're seeking from them, and then supporting funds from others. So other levels of government, from the community, and then the value added that you're getting through volunteers to make up your total budget. Because they don't want to see themselves as the sole funder for a project. They're one of the funders. They may make up 50% of the project, but you've got to show them that you're talking to others as well. Yeah, and the last thing I say, I use ChatGPT a lot.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I mean, that's when you're a small organization, and we're striving to get money. I mean, maybe we need to pay somebody to be our project writer. Oh,
And sometimes you can get a grant for that too, for the project writers.
thank you.
One thing I'll say from personal experience, as far as hiring somebody for project writing or grant writing or what have you, very useful, I think, to do a sort of internal exercise first in terms of clarifying your own thinking and sort of goals around certain things. Because no matter how skilled a project writer is, there can sometimes be a sort of understanding gap where they're not fully, if you're not able to sufficiently articulate your vision and your intentions, they can sometimes misinterpret. And I mean, through no fault of their own, that's just sort of the nature of communication. But yeah, I'd certainly encourage, if you're going to go that route, make sure you feel pretty secure in terms of what you want to have communicated in your grant, so that they can then articulate that as strongly as possible on your behalf.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions? Okay, well, Sandy, I'd like to thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's just been terrific, and it really is inspiring, I think, for other groups, because I suspect there are probably a number of people here who are hoping to do the kind of project that you've managed to succeed doing. So that's very exciting indeed. And Nick, I think you might have a final few words to say.
Indeed, I do. I'll mention the next session in this webinar series, and Sandy has done some really excellent foreshadowing for this by mentioning them multiple times throughout the presentation. We will have Cameron Piper from the CPRQ, that's the Conseil du Patrimoine Religieux du Québec, who will be presenting for us on November the 26th. And he'll be talking about the resources offered by the CPRQ. As Sandy mentioned, their funding is sort of temporarily cut. I don't know that that is absolutely confirmed that that is a permanent thing, but that being said, they do have resources and they do have expertise aside from just their funding program. So Cameron is going to be talking about that in detail on the 26th. So you can either keep an eye on the Elan newsletter for the details for that, or I think what we're going to do is we're going to share the RSVP link directly with anybody who signed up for this, just so you have that and you can RSVP for the next session if you like. And the intention with all of these is to, as much as possible, as much as our presenters are comfortable with that, to record these so that we can put together a playlist on YouTube so you can watch through all of them and have a bit of a resource that you can refer back to.
That's terrific, Nick. Will it be at the same time on November 26th?
I believe it will be slightly later, but I'm just in the process of confirming that with Cameron now.
Okay, so we'll get those details later. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope that you'll be back on November 26th.